Were words I heard that were never meant for my ears. And the moment I heard them, something inside me went very, very quiet. Let me back up. My name is June Hartley. I'm 67 years old. I live alone in a two-bedroom house in Knoxville, Tennessee. And for most of my adult life, people who know me would say the same thing about me. June gives too much. My late husband used to tease me about it. June, he'd say, you'd give away your last dollar and then apologize for not having more. He wasn't wrong. After he passed, that was 6 years ago now, I threw myself into family. My son, my grandchildren, the holidays, the birthdays. I was the one who remembered everyone's food allergies. I was the one who drove 2 hours to see a school play. I was the one who, every single Christmas, made sure nobody went without. My granddaughter, Cassidy, was always my favorite. I know grandparents aren't supposed to say that, but Cassidy and I had something special from the beginning. When she was little, she'd fall asleep on my lap during Sunday afternoon movies. She called me Gram June. She used to draw pictures of the two of us. Stick figures. Always holding hands. Always with big smiley faces. That was the version of Cassidy I loved, without reservation. The version of Cassidy who existed by the time she turned 26. Well, I'm still making peace with who that girl became. She called me on a Tuesday morning in March, and her voice had that brightness to it that I now recognize as the brightness of someone who wants something. Gram June, how are you? I feel like I haven't talked to you in forever. It had been 3 months. I had counted. But I said I was fine, wonderful, so happy to hear from her. And she said she had news, big news. She and her boyfriend, a young man named Preston, were engaged. I was genuinely happy. Preston seemed decent enough on the few occasions I'd met him. Quiet, a little stiff. The kind of young man who shakes your hand too firmly and calls you ma'am. But he looked at Cassidy like she was the most important thing in the room, and I respected that. We talked for 40 minutes, which was longer than we'd talked in probably a year combined. She told me about the ring, princess cut, rose gold setting, custom band. She told me about how he proposed at a rooftop restaurant in Nashville. Fairy lights everywhere, her friends hiding around the corner with a video camera. It sounded like a movie scene. It sounded expensive. And then she got quiet for a moment, that particular kind of quiet that isn't really quiet at all, and she said, Gram June, I need to tell you something. Preston and I have been saving, but honestly, weddings are just so much more than we expected. Mom and Dad are helping a little, but they've got the mortgage situation and everything. And I don't know. I've been dreaming about this wedding my whole life. I knew what she was asking before she asked it. And God help me. I said yes before she finished the sentence. I want to be fair to myself here. I wasn't naive. I knew it would be significant money. I had savings. 31 years of teaching high school English, a small inheritance from my husband's mother, a pension I've been careful with. I wasn't wealthy by any definition, but I was comfortable, and I thought, what is comfort for if not the people you love? We agreed on a budget of $75,000. Yes, $75,000. I know how that sounds. I know what some of you are thinking right now because I've thought it myself since. But at the time, Cassidy sat across from me at my kitchen table with her eyes shining, showing me venue websites on her laptop. And I thought about that little girl with the stick figure drawings. I thought about what my husband would have wanted. I thought, this is the one big thing I can do. So I said yes, and I meant it. We made an agreement. Cassidy and I sitting right there at that kitchen table over coffee and peach cobbler, that we would plan this together. She would have final say on the aesthetic decisions, the flowers, the dress, all of that. But since my name was going on the contracts and my account was funding the deposits, I would be present for every vendor meeting, every single one. That was my only condition. She hugged me so hard I lost my breath. She said, Gram June, you are literally the best person on this planet. I believed her. I really did. The first 2 months were wonderful, actually. I want to say that honestly, because the story isn't one-sided. There were good weeks. Cassidy and I toured 3 venues together. We tasted wedding cake at a bakery in Brentwood, lemon lavender, which I thought sounded bizarre and turned out to be extraordinary. We had lunch afterward at a little place she liked, and she showed me Pinterest boards and asked my opinion on centerpieces. And I remember driving home that evening feeling full in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. I thought I was doing something right. I thought we were building something. What I didn't realize was that I was being grandfathered in, if you'll pardon the term, to the early planning stages because Cassidy needed my enthusiasm to stay high. The moment the deposits cleared, the dynamic began to shift in ways so gradual I almost didn't notice. The first sign was the florist. We had an appointment scheduled. A Thursday at 2 o'clock, at a boutique flower studio in East Nashville that Cassidy had been excited about for weeks. I drove the hour and 40 minutes, found parking, walked to the address. The studio was locked. I called Cassidy. She answered on the fourth ring. "Oh, Graham, June. I'm sorry, I should have texted you. We moved the appointment to Wednesday. Preston's mom wanted to come along, so we switched it." Preston's mother was a woman named Vivienne. I had met her once, briefly. She wore large sunglasses indoors and referred to the wedding as the kids' event. I told Cassidy it was fine. I told her I understood. I drove home. An hour and 40 minutes. She did not offer to reschedule so I could attend. After that, things accelerated in a direction I didn't have language for yet. The caterer was chosen without me. We had a cancellation and had to book on the spot. Graham, June, you know how it is. The photographer was finalized without me. We'd already been following her work for months. It just kind of happened. The invitation designer, the transportation vendor, the hair and makeup artist, all done, all booked, all presented to me as finished decisions. I kept being told about things rather than included in them. I tried, once, to gently say something. I reminded Cassidy of our agreement at the kitchen table, that I would be present for vendor meetings. She laughed, lightly, the way you laugh at something you find slightly exhausting. "Graham, June, I know, it just moved fast. You're still so involved, though. You're the whole reason any of this is possible. The whole reason any of this is possible. The whole reason any of this is possible." That sentence was supposed to be a compliment. I turned it over in my mind for 3 days. I started to understand that I was not a partner in this wedding. I was the funding mechanism. A very beloved, very essential funding mechanism, but a mechanism nonetheless. Still, I adjusted. I told myself that this was her wedding, not mine. I told myself I was being too sensitive, too attached to the idea of being included. I tried to release my grip on the expectation and just be happy for her. I was almost managing it. And then came the afternoon in April. Cassidy had invited me to come by her apartment to see the venue contract before she signed her, or so I thought. That was the plan, as I understood it. I drove up on a Saturday, let myself into the building the way I always did, walked up to the second floor. The apartment door was slightly open. She was inside, on the phone. I raised my hand to knock. I stopped. She was talking to someone, her friend, I think, from the way she was speaking. And I heard my name. I mean, Graham, June means well, but honestly, she's everywhere. Like, this is my wedding, you know? She acts like because she's paying for it, she gets to have opinions about everything. A pause. Laughter on the other end. "No, I know. Okay, can I say something terrible? Sometimes I think it would genuinely be easier if she just wasn't so involved. Like if she could just write the check and stay home, that would be ideal." More laughter. "Is that awful?" "That's awful, right? I love her, I do. She's just a lot." I stood in the hallway outside my granddaughter's apartment with my hand still raised to knock, and I felt something happen inside me that I don't have a precise word for. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was more like the sensation of something you've been holding for a very long time becoming very suddenly, very simply, too heavy. I put my hand down. I walked back down the stairs. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 22 minutes. I know because I looked at the clock when I got in, and I looked at it again when I started the engine. Then I drove home. I didn't tell anyone what I'd heard, not my son, Cassidy's father, who had been conspicuously absent from this entire process, which was its own conversation I wasn't ready to have, not my friend Wanda, who'd been suspicious of this whole arrangement from the beginning and would have said "I told you so," with the particular gentleness of someone who genuinely wishes they've been wrong. I just went home. I made chamomile tea. I sat in my living room in the chair by the window that gets the evening light, and I thought for a very long time. Here's what I kept coming back to. I wasn't hurt because Cassidy found me annoying. Families are complicated. Grandmothers can be a lot. I understood that. What I kept circling back to, what I couldn't move past, was the phrase, "write the check and stay home." Write the check and stay home. She wasn't embarrassed by my over-involvement in a warm, complicated, human way. She was frustrated that the ATM had opinions. She wanted the transaction without the relationship. and she was laughing about it. That was what I kept sitting with. By 9 o'clock that night, I had made a decision. I didn't make it in anger. I want to be very clear about that, because anger would have been easier to second guess later. I made it in the same quiet way I'd made most of the important decisions in my life, slowly, clearly, and with the particular certainty that comes from finally telling yourself the truth. The next morning was a Sunday. I waited until 10 o'clock, which I felt was reasonable. Then I called my bank. I had not yet paid the venue deposit in full. Only a hold had been placed. I released it. The venue coordinator called me within the hour, confused, and I explained politely that there had been a change in plans and I appreciated their time. Then I called the caterer, whose contract I had signed but whose first payment wasn't due for another 3 weeks. I spoke with the event coordinator, a patient woman named Rosalind, and I withdrew from the agreement. There was a small cancellation fee, which I accepted without argument. The photographer, same process. The transportation company. The invitation designer, who had only just received our final word count and had not yet begun printing. One by one. I worked through the list methodically, the same way I used to grade papers. Fully present, no shortcuts, start to finish. It took most of Sunday and part of Monday morning. I did not call Cassidy. She called me on Tuesday afternoon. I was in my backyard pulling weeds from around the rose bushes when my phone rang, her name on the screen, and I felt my chest tighten in the way it does when you've been waiting for something and it finally arrives. I answered, Graham June. Her voice was different now. No brightness. The venue just called me. They said the reservation was canceled. What's going on? Yes, I said. I canceled it. Silence. What? Why? What happened? I thought about what to say. I had rehearsed several versions of this conversation in my head over the past 2 days. Some of them were long and detailed. I laid out everything I'd heard, everything I'd felt, the florist appointment I'd driven to alone, all of it. Some were short, barely a sentence. What I said was this: Cassidy, I love you. I have loved you since before you could hold your own head up, but I'm not going to fund a wedding for someone who sees me as an inconvenience she has to manage. I heard what you said to your friend, and I think, in your heart, you already know that what you said was not kind. Another silence. Longer this time. Graham June, I don't know what you don't have to explain, I said. I'm not calling to fight. I'm calling because you deserve to hear this from me directly and not from a vendor. She started to cry. I expected that. She said she was sorry, that she hadn't meant it, that she was stressed and had been venting and it came out wrong. I believed, genuinely, that some of that was true. Stress does strange things to people. It strips away the careful versions of ourselves we try to present to the world and leaves something raw. But I also knew that write the check and stay home doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from somewhere you've been sitting for a while. I told her I needed some time. I told her I was not disappearing from her life. I was not that kind of grandmother, and I never would be. But I was stepping back from the wedding and from the financial agreement we had made, and I needed her to respect that. She cried harder. She asked what she was supposed to do now. I said gently that I thought that question was actually a really good one for her and Preston and her parents to sit with together. Then I said goodbye and I went back to my rose bushes. I want to tell you what I did that week, because I think it matters. I booked a trip. I had been wanting to go to the Pacific Northwest for years. My late husband and I had always talked about it and never made it there, and somehow after he was gone the idea of going without him felt too sad. But that week, sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee and my laptop open, I booked 11 days in Oregon, Portland, the coast, Crater Lake, a small inn outside Ashland run by a woman about my age who grew her own vegetables and had 3 dogs and a 4-star rating from people who described the breakfast as life-changing. I paid for it with the money I would have sent to the venue. I also called my son. That was a harder conversation. He was defensive at first. He and Cassidy are close, and I think he heard my account of events through the filter of protecting her. But I wasn't asking him to take sides. I was telling him as clearly as I could that his daughter needed her parents to be present in her life in ways that weren't financial. That somewhere along the way she had learned to value money over people, and I didn't think she'd learn that entirely on her own. He was quiet for a long time. He said he talked to her. I don't know what he said. I didn't ask. The trip was everything I needed it to be. I hiked trails I'd never seen, slowly and with frequent rest stops, which I have decided is the only honorable way to hike when you're 67. I ate oysters on the Oregon coast at a weathered picnic table with the wind in my hair. I drove through the Willamette Valley on a Tuesday morning with no agenda whatsoever. The radio on, the windows cracked, and I thought, this is mine. This piece is mine. Nobody can give it to me and nobody can take it. I sent my son a postcard, a photograph of the coast, one of those moody gray sky ones where the waves are dramatic and the rocks look ancient. On the back I wrote, "Wish you were here. Working on it." Cassidy sent me a letter about 6 weeks after I got home. An actual letter, handwritten, on stationery. 4 pages. I read it at the kitchen table on a Wednesday afternoon with the windows open and the sound of the neighbor's lawnmower in the background. She apologized. Not in the quick surface way of someone trying to get something back. In the slow, uncomfortable way of someone who has actually spent time looking at themselves. She wrote about the pressure she'd been under, the impossible standards she'd set for herself about this wedding, the way she had started treating the people who loved her like pieces on a board to be moved into position. She wrote, "I turned my own grandmother into a vendor, and I'm ashamed of that. She did not ask me to reinstate the money. That meant something to me." She said she and Preston were planning a much smaller ceremony, something at the county botanical garden, 40 people, her aunt's famous potato salad, her college roommate's husband playing acoustic guitar. She said it was actually starting to feel more like them. At the end of the letter she wrote, "I miss you, Graham June. Not the money. Just you." I sat with that for a long time. I didn't write back right away. I thought about it for almost 2 weeks. And then one afternoon I drove to a stationery shop downtown, and I bought a card. Nothing sentimental. Just clean cream cardstock with a small botanical print in the corner. And I wrote, "Cassidy, I am proud of who you are choosing to become. That's the only version of you I was ever interested in. I love you. Graham June." I sealed it, stamped it, mailed it on my way to the grocery store. I have thought often about what the lesson is supposed to be here. I don't think there's a clean one. Life doesn't usually cooperate with clean lessons. What I know is this: I spent a great deal of my life being the person who gave and asked nothing in return, and I told myself that was generosity. I think some of it was, and some of it was something else, a fear of being difficult, of being too much, of taking up space. I had learned, somewhere in my 67 years, to make myself smaller so that others could feel larger. I am done with that particular habit. $75,000 is a lot of money, but what I nearly spent wasn't money. It was myself. It was the last version of myself that still knows how to say, "This is not acceptable," and mean it. And that's not something I could afford to lose. Not at this age, not at any age. My trip to Oregon cost me $4,216, including the inn and the car rental and the oysters and a very good bottle of wine I shared with the innkeeper on my last evening there, sitting on her porch watching the sun go down over her vegetable garden while her dogs took turns putting their heads in my lap. It was the best money I have ever spent. The botanical garden wedding was on a Saturday in October. The forecast called for rain and then changed its mind. The sky was that particular autumn blue that only happens in Tennessee in the fall. Clear and high and almost startling. Cassidy wore a simple dress, cream silk, nothing like the cathedral-length gown she'd originally chosen. She looked beautiful. She looked like herself. I sat in the 3rd row. When she came down the makeshift aisle, the botanical garden path lined with potted maples just beginning to turn, she caught my eye and she smiled. And it was the smile of the little girl who used to fall asleep on my lap. I'm not going to tell you I didn't cry. I cried quite a bit. Her father walked her down the path. My son, who had not always been present in the ways he should have been, who still has growing to do. He walked his daughter down that path with his shoulders square and his eyes red and his hand over hers, and I thought, good, start there. That's a good place to start. After the reception, the potato salad was in fact extraordinary. Cassidy found me by the garden's koi pond, where I had retreated for a few quiet minutes. She sat down beside me. We watched the fish for a while without saying anything. Then she said, "Thank you for coming, Graham June." And I said, "There's nowhere else I would have been." And that was true. Completely, simply true. I drove home that evening with the windows down, the radio on, Tennessee hills going gold and copper in the last of the light. I thought about my husband, who would have loved that wedding. I thought about the woman I have spent 67 years becoming, and the parts of her I had nearly given away. I kept both hands on the wheel. I kept going. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately. Not in any grand cosmic sense, just the plain, practical kind. The kind where you look back at a chain of events and you can see clearly how one thing led to the next. How a habit of giving without limit quietly teaches the people around you that limits don't exist. How a pattern of swallowing your discomfort to keep the peace teaches the people you love that your discomfort doesn't matter. I didn't arrive at that apartment hallway in April by accident. I arrived there because I had spent years making it very easy for Cassidy to see me as a resource rather than a person. That's a hard thing to admit. It would be simpler to make her the villain of this story and leave it at that. She said something cruel. She laughed about it. Both of those things are true. But I also know that people don't wake up one morning and decide to treat their grandmothers like ATMs. They learn it. Gradually, through 100 small moments where the grandmother in question handed over money and affection and asked for nothing in return except to be needed. I was very good at being needed. I was not as good at being honest about what I needed back. What I needed was simple. I needed to matter as a person, not just as a resource. I needed Cassidy to know, really know, in the way you only know things through consequences, that love and money are not the same currency. I had confused them myself for a long time. I thought that if I gave enough financially, it would be understood as love. What I didn't realize was that when you translate love entirely into money, people start to think that's all love is. The decision I made that Sunday morning, calling the venue, calling Rosalind at the catering company, working methodically through that list, wasn't revenge. I want to be precise about that. It felt nothing like anger. It felt like finally being honest, like saying out loud to myself and to the situation, this is not what I agreed to. I agreed to be part of something. I was not part of something. I was an account number with a grandmother's name attached to it, and I was done pretending otherwise. And then I went to Oregon. I ate oysters in the wind. I sat on a porch with a woman I'd never met and shared a bottle of wine and watched the sun set over her vegetable garden, and I thought, I have earned this. Not just the trip, this. The right to take up space. The right to be more than useful. That thought, simple as it sounds, felt enormous. It felt like something I'd been working toward without knowing it for most of my adult life. Cassidy sent me that letter. She didn't have to. Nobody made her. And when she wrote that she missed me, not the money, I believed her. Not because I'm naive, but because I recognized something in those words. I recognized the particular tone of someone who has looked at themselves clearly and didn't entirely like what they saw. That kind of honesty cost something. I respected it. What I hope for Cassidy is that she carries what happened with her. Not as shame isn't useful for very long, but as knowledge. The knowledge that the people who love you most are still people. That their dignity is not negotiable no matter how much they love you. That you can lose someone's money and repair it, but you can lose someone's trust and spend years earning it back one careful day at a time. And what I carry forward is this. I am 67 years old, and I am not finished becoming who I want to be. That October afternoon at the botanical garden, watching my son walk his daughter down that path, watching Cassidy look like herself, finally in a simple silk dress with no cathedral train and no overpriced centerpieces, I understood something I hadn't fully understood before. The smaller, truer version of that wedding was better. Not because it cost less, because it was honest. And honesty, it turns out, is the only foundation anything real can be built on, including the slow, careful, still possible relationship between a grandmother and the granddaughter she has loved since before that granddaughter could hold her own head up. I kept going. That's the whole story. I kept going, and it turned out there was something worth going toward,